what's cool about what we're doing is that we sort of made our whole product and our whole experience as social as possible. When you create videos, when you share videos on any channel, whether it's Dub or YouTube or LinkedIn, it doesn't matter. You're promoting your content, but you're also inherently promoting the service behind that content. Now, of course, LinkedIn and YouTube, they're the great examples. Also Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But Dub is a small little fish in that ocean. So people get to kind of see what the platform is behind the content. So
yeah, great, awesome.
Yeah, man. So well, listen, I'm so psyched to chat with you, man. I've heard so many good things. You and I have this unique thing because we've known of each other for 2 decades now, through a common friend who I know is dear to both of us, Nishit Bhatt, who's one of the most brilliant guys that I know. Funny enough, side story, I've been trying to get him to get his personality out there like crazy on a podcast, on video. He's such a thought leader. Like, dare I use that term, thought leader? He's so humble,
It's
almost
not used with him, right? It just
it stays with him.
we get overused right now, and he's been that thought leader for a long time, and so
yeah.
I mean, yes, get him on a screen and get him to start talking to people for sure.
He's the thought leader behind the thought leader. I've learned so much from that guy, whether it's music or about wisdom and Eastern philosophies, and just collaboration and just having fun, man. So anyways, it's super good to connect. I'm also really passionate about what you're doing. Now here's what I know. I could be completely wrong about this, so please correct me. But from what I understand, word of mouth is that law firms are broken to a certain extent, and the attorneys are overworked, they're overstressed, there's a certain lack of balance. And I think that you bring some sort of a structure or a framework or some sort of a system to increase productivity, but also long-term happiness. Now, tell me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I practiced for about 15 years. I was a partner at a law firm at a patent litigation practice in DC, and then for 5 years I was in-house at Apple. And in my last 5 years, of course, I started to take on, I'd been practicing yoga for about 10 years and started to practice meditation that much more regularly. And I think through these practices, I started to notice this interesting pattern that obviously we've accepted in some of these professions and lawyers and some of these challenging professions, that work causes stress. And that's something that we just sort of take and are okay with as a society. And there's a certain pay and a stature and whatever it comes with that. And so we're like, okay, that of course it's going to be stressful. And I think what I started to notice is that this cycle continues where then stress starts to impact the quality of how we are and who we are, our relationships, and ultimately the work product. And so work causes stress, and then stress reduces the quality of the work. And then we were just sort of accepting this as this is okay, and this is par for the course, and you just sort of have to deal with it. And I felt like breaking this cycle. And so a few years back, I left the practice and I sort of retooled and retrained. I trained as a mindfulness instructor. I trained as a yoga teacher. And then ultimately, not necessarily wanting everybody in their law firms on yoga mats, although that would necessarily be a bad idea.
Did you go through the RYT 200 process?
I went through Baptiste training, and so okay. I did a part of the yoga teacher training for Baptiste, which is a vinyasa flow nice. Yoga teaching. Yeah, so I did 100 hours, and so nice. Through that process, ultimately I started teaching. I'm trained as an executive coach, and I now go into law firms and legal departments trying to talk about how we can break that cycle. And I coach attorneys one-on-one. I try to identify what's challenging in their practice and try to move it out of the way so that they have something more fulfilling. And then I do that with the groups also. And we talk about a range of topics that allow us to start to appreciate that we don't have to relate to stress in the way that we believe we do. We don't have to normalize it.
Isn't stress just the interpretation of conflict?
It's an interpretation of conflict, yes, but I think it's so much more than that. I don't know that every time that you get stressed, you're necessarily in conflict. I think that there's a perception that you are in conflict. I think there's this belief. And I think what I talk about in part is that it's healthy to start challenging this belief of the way that things have to be. I think it's also more complex and complicated in the legal work environment because you're raised in a place where you're just constantly being subject to an adversarial nature. And
Well, I
so,
mean, that's definitely the stereotype. I mean, I'm reminded of how attorneys and lawyers and whatnot are portrayed in media. I mean, Al Pacino, in the Devil's Advocate. I mean, this idea that attorneys have to be sharks, basically, and so I get it. That makes sense to me.
well, that media portrayal actually makes some lawyers believe that that has to be the case. And it
Yes,
doesn't always have to be the case.
right.
But then second,
Art dictates reality.
you know that are more so than even the rest of us, and it's just true. You can't see a TV show with lawyers in the evening without alcohol in the room.
Well, I mean, they all have scotch in the back and cigars and behind their
And
closed mahogany doors.
it sort of perpetuates what lawyers think I mean, on Friday at the end of the day, when I was at my law firm, of course, what was I doing? I was opening up a bottle of scotch, putting out 5 glasses, sending an email out to my colleagues and saying, come on into my office. Yeah. And I was sort of portraying, sort of living what I thought and what I felt like was the thing that we do as lawyers.
Yeah. So how are you getting the word out? How are you evangelizing? And I mean, I've seen your content on LinkedIn, and I'm definitely a fan. I've seen some great photos and some thought leadership pieces, some talks that you've done. I mean, one of the things that I always like to do is to share whatever knowledge that I know. I mean, my 10,000 hours is in video and marketing and automation and original content and social media and all that stuff, that kind of full stack. So one of the things that I love to do when I really connect with people and their causes, I love to say, hey, listen, this is what I've picked up along the way, and have you tried this? Or I invite you to check that out. So I'd love to know some of the things that you're doing, and then maybe how I could help.
Yeah, I mean, my conversation and my work has really been rooted in my coaching practice. Is where it all started, and just working with lawyers, identifying what's been challenging for them, really working on a range of issues. And I think through that work, when that's effective, and a client will introduce me to their law firm and say, hey, we'd love to bring you in. My 10,000 hours was in the legal practice also. And so I have, and having been a partner and having been at a place like Apple, obviously there's just a deep network and connection. And so a lot of the ways in which I've been able to connect with the folks that I want to connect with are just through the network that I've had for many years. So all of it that's been what's fruitful, is just reaching out to friends, old ways of communicating, picking up the phone, letting folks know about what I'm doing, sending messages, and then coming back. And then over time, just, I've never been the type of person that felt comfortable promoting myself on social media. And I think you probably hear that a lot. And I'm just in that boat. I think we're part of a generation of people where this is something that we've been picking up. And I realize and appreciate the importance and need of making sure that the work that I'm doing and the way that I'm connecting with clients, that information gets out into the world. And so, I started to share photos and a few lessons on LinkedIn, not very regularly. And then in the last few months, just slightly more so. And I just feel like I have a lot to learn on the various ways that I can actually support people through this medium. And so it's one thing to be able to say, hey, here's what I've done and take a look at this. And I appreciate that. And I just feel like there's so much more value in these various mediums and channels to communicate with folks out there. And so this is why I reached out to you. I'm just very curious about how we can use these platforms to actually support folks in different ways. I connect with my clients over the phone. I go into law firms, legal departments, and host workshops and dialogue and facilitate conversation. I feel like there's actually more that can be done through video, and I'm sort of entering my curiosity of this whole space.
Yeah, I mean, I think of there's a couple of things that come to mind. So the first is,
With Dub, you can easily send your business videos from Gmail, LinkedIn, CRMs, and so many more places, but you don't have to take my word for it.
Absolutely perfect.
Screen records, landing pages that can really help businesses to grow.